Hello. So I want to talk you through how I planned a year four maths meeting using the times table strategy. And in this, we focused on the 8 times table, and it was their first introduction to the 8 times table. So this is the initial lesson. So when I'm looking through the strategy materials, I can see there is a PowerPoint for the 2, the 4 and the 8 times table, but that's not the one I'm going to use because that is about all the connections between those tables. The one I'm going to use is just the 8 times table on its own. And then I'm going to use the teacher guide for the 2, 4 and 8 times table because this has information about teaching them separately and then making the connections. Now you can see that the bit I've highlighted is the sentence stems. So the guidance starts off, and I've gone straight to teaching point 3, which is the one that talks about the 8 times table. In fact, I will show you that. So if I go back to the start, you can see the 5 different teaching points. I just want to teach that first bit, counting in multiples of 8 can be represented by the 8 times table. So it's just this bit here that I am looking at in this first session. So I'm going to go to teaching point 3. And I can do that without having to scroll through everything by clicking on the thumbnails and seeing that actually teaching point 3, I can see that it starts on page 26, and then I click to there. And these are the sentence stems that I'm going to be using whilst I'm using the slides. So I really want pupils to understand about the groups element of teaching times tables and the language of factor and product. So I'll show you the whole slides for the 8 times table. This is them here. There are, 18 slides for teaching the 8 times table. And in this session, I had planned to go up to slide 6. I thought that's how far I'd get, but in actual fact, I did slide 1 and 2 only in the 15-minute session. And it felt that that's what was needed, and that was enough to give them in the time. So when we say teach a 8 times table for half a term, these slides should not be rushed through. Really, a couple of slides per lesson is probably about right. So in the next session, I would move on to looking at what those groups, counting in groups of 8, what that looks like, how it can be represented in different ways, about equal groups, and then them understanding those relationships between the factors and the product. So if we go to the slides that I actually created, that's not them, that's them. I started off by using the slides that are on Teams that show the times tables that the pupils have learnt already. I think it's really important for building confidence for pupils to see that actually, yes, there's all these facts that they have to learn, that we go up to 12 times 12. There's so many facts they have to learn, but because of the commutativity, they know so many of them already. So if they know their 2s, their 5s and 10s, they already know lots of tables. Now, by the time I was teaching this year 4 group, they knew their 2s, 5s, 10s and 4s. And now we are learning their 8s. So you can see there are some facts they need to learn, but there are others which they already know. And pointing that out at the start of every maths session supports those pupils who feel overwhelmed by the amount that they need to learn, that actually as they gain knowledge of the facts, there are fewer and fewer that they need to know. I then had the counting stick, and we counted up and back through the counting stick. I replicated that slide because I thought I wanted to do it more than once. So we did that again. We counted up and back through the times table. Then I showed them this image again to illustrate the facts that we know already and the ones that we need to know. Because then on this slide, it comes up with some of the facts, but not all of them. And the reason it has some of them in there is these are the ones they have learnt, and the ones that are not in there, and the ones that they will be learning. Now, for some of those pupils, they will know them already. And there are children who can tell me their 8 times table already, but there are others who will need that reminding. Now, obviously, this is done in the order of if you have taught times tables using the Unity strategy order the whole way through. Now, if you haven't, you may have taught in they may have taught in year 3 the 3s first, then the 4s, then the 8s. You'll notice here that the 3s are blank, and because using our strategy, we teach the 2s, the 4s, and the 8s, and then the 3s afterwards, still within year 3, but just a slightly different order. So you might need to adapt the PowerPoint if they do know those facts already. And then I looked in the guidance and I thought there's lots around pupils being able to show their learning, and the bit that I want pupils to know is that we're making equal groups. And when I keep talking about groups of 8, what that actually means. So then we went back to building. So at this point I asked them to build 3 times 8 as an unknown fact, because first of all, I needed to know that I had enough resources to do that. And if they started trying to build 12 times 8, that's an awful lot of cubes or double-sided counters. And keeping them all on the same fact meant that I could show different ways in which they'd represented it. You could also get them to represent it, so they could draw their fact. And what I wanted them to do is to really identify the structure of the fact that they're using as well. So they started off, you'll see, by piling them up, and then actually we went to, well, what does this look like? How can we put this in an array? How can we ensure we know there are equal parts? The key bit I kept coming back to is that language of factor, product, and groups of. And really, that's the only thing I wanted them to know by the end of that 15-minute session. The next stage would be then to look at the jumping forward and looking, when we go down here, this guidance here tells me how I'm going to teach the next maths meeting that I do around the 8 times table. And again, it's about that representation of groups of 8 and factor and product. So it's not something new. We're building on the knowledge that they've already been introduced to. I hope it's useful for you. I found it really easy to plan with those resources and use them. There's so much there. I think the key thing is not to overestimate what you're going to teach in a maths meeting if you want to give pupils the time to really explore and discover, develop their understanding of a times table. Thank you.